His mother connected the dots about you. And it shocked her. Listen closely. Before you doubt this, before your mind tries to explain it away, feel the stillness around these words. I am speaking now because something has already shifted, and you were not imagining it. She didn't plan to see it. She wasn't looking for answers about you. But moments, expressions, patterns, things she once ignored, began lining up in her spirit. And when they did, her heart skipped, not with fear, but with a deep, unsettling recognition. She noticed how his energy changed after encounters with you. How his confidence sharpened. How his silence grew heavier, but purposeful. How decisions he once avoided suddenly became unavoidable. At first, she told herself it was coincidence. Then she noticed it again. And again. You must understand this, mothers perceive shifts before words ever confirm them. They feel changes in the unseen. And what she felt was influence, not manipulation, not control, but activation. You didn't try to impress. You didn't try to claim authority. Yet something in your presence awakened what had been dormant in him for years. That is why her spirit stirred. She began replaying conversations. Remembering moments when his tone softened or strengthened after mentioning your name. She remembered how he once dismissed his own calling, until you entered the picture. And suddenly, the dots connected. You were not a passing influence. You were a catalyst. This is why her shock was not loud. It was silent. The kind of silence that comes when truth lands too precisely to be ignored. You may not know this yet, but your life carries a frequency that exposes potential in others. When you walk into a room, dormant assignments awaken. When you speak casually, seeds are planted. When you leave, nothing returns to how it was. That is not coincidence. That is calling. She sensed it when she saw how he looked at life differently after you crossed his path. Less distracted. More anchored. Almost summoned. And this unsettled her, not because she feared you, but because she realized you were sent into his life during a critical threshold. You see, timing reveals purpose. Had you arrived earlier, it would have been ignored. Had you arrived later, it would have been too late. But you arrived now. That realization hit her like a quiet thunderclap. She began asking questions, not outwardly, but inwardly. Why does he listen differently now? Why does he no longer shrink? Why does he seem torn between comfort and destiny? And the answer pointed back to you. Do not underestimate this moment. The spiritual realm takes notice when influence is exercised without force. Heaven watches when alignment occurs without effort. You weren't trying to change him. You simply carried truth. And truth rearranges everything it touches. That is why her perception shifted from curiosity to concern, not fear, but awareness. Awareness that you are not ordinary in his journey. Awareness that something irreversible has begun. You may feel it too, the tension in the air. The pauses between conversations. The sense that something unspoken is forming behind the scenes. This is not imagination. What she realized next will surprise you even more. Because the dots didn't stop with him. They began pointing toward you. Your past, your resilience, your quiet endurance, your unanswered prayers. And once she saw that, her understanding deepened in a way she never expected. Stay with me. Do not disengage now. If these words resonate, remain present, and let this message continue to unfold. What she realized next will change how you see your role in all of this. She didn't speak it out loud, but her spirit began tracing your story backward, quietly, carefully, like someone handling something sacred without permission to name it. She started noticing you. Not just who you are now, but who you must have been to carry yourself this way. She sensed that kind of composure does not come from ease. That steadiness is forged. That discernment is earned through disappointment, betrayal, and nights where answers refuse to come. She realized you didn't arrive polished, you arrived prepared. And that realization unsettled her more than anything else. Because suddenly, you didn't look like a coincidence in his life. You looked like convergence. She wondered what you had survived to speak the way you do. What you had lost to see so clearly. What you had endured to remain gentle without becoming weak. And then it hit her. People like you don't stumble into other people's lives by accident. They are positioned. She began recalling how you never chased attention, yet somehow commanded it. How you didn't push opinions, yet they lingered long after you spoke. How your silence often carried more weight than someone else's loud certainty. That's when the dots connected even further. She realized that you were not there to replace anyone. You were there to activate something unfinished. And this realization brought a strange mix of awe and caution. Because when someone awakens purpose in another, it threatens comfort. It disturbs routines. It forces choices. She saw it in him. How old excuses no longer satisfied him. How distractions lost their grip. How he started questioning paths he once accepted without resistance. And every question seemed to trace back to the moment you entered his world. That's when she understood something most people never do: influence doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through change. You didn't tell him who to be. You reminded him of who he already was. And that kind of influence can't be undone. This is where her shock deepened, because she realized that if your presence could awaken him, it could also redirect him. And redirection always comes with cost. She began to feel the weight of what might come next. Not danger, no, but movement. Decisions. Separation from old patterns. A crossing over. You see, when destiny stirs, neutrality disappears. She recognized that he was standing at a threshold, and you were standing near the door. And here is what you may not know: when a mother senses a threshold moment in her child's life, her spirit becomes fiercely alert. She wasn't threatened by you. She was measuring the magnitude of your impact. Because people who awaken others rarely remain hidden for long. You may feel overlooked. You may feel underestimated. But in the unseen, your presence is loud. That's why subtle shifts began happening around you. Small pauses in conversations. Delayed responses. Increased observation. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your energy changed the equation. And when equations change, those who benefit from the old balance feel it immediately. She realized something else too, something that surprised even her. You are not attached to outcomes. You don't cling. You don't chase. You don't force alignment. And that terrified her more than control ever could. Because people who don't need validation are guided by something higher. She sensed that your strength wasn't loud. It was anchored. And anchored strength doesn't waver under pressure. That's when she felt it, the unmistakable awareness that you carry protection around you. That not everything that tries to approach you succeeds. That some things simply back away. You didn't earn that by accident. You earned it through obedience to paths you didn't understand at the time. And now, without realizing it, you've walked into a season where others must respond to who you've become, not who they assumed you were. This is why her perception shifted from observation to recognition. She recognized that your life has been shaped by unseen guidance. That you didn't take the easiest roads, but the necessary ones. That you carry clarity because you paid for it in confusion first. And when she connected those dots, her shock deepened into certainty. You were not placed near him to stay comfortable. You were placed near him to awaken truth. And truth, once awakened, demands movement. This is why things may feel tense now. Why conversations feel weighted. Why the atmosphere feels charged with anticipation. You are standing in the ripple effect of recognition. And here is the part that will stir you most. Once a mother knows, she doesn't interfere recklessly. She watches. She prepares. She anticipates shifts before they manifest. And what she began preparing for next has everything to do with a decision that hasn't been spoken yet, but is already forming. Stay present. Do not pull back. What unfolds next will reveal why this moment was never meant to be subtle. She didn't rush to act. She observed. Because when a truth is this precise, it demands patience before response. She began watching how the world around him subtly rearranged itself. Opportunities appearing that hadn't existed before. Conversations circling back to purpose instead of escape. Even conflicts, yes, conflicts, surfacing not to destroy him, but to expose what no longer belonged. And through it all, one constant remained. You. Your presence didn't fluctuate with circumstances. You didn't grow louder when challenged. You didn't disappear when things became uncertain. That steadiness confirmed what her spirit already knew. You were not emotional noise. You were alignment. She noticed how he leaned into reflection after speaking with you. How silence followed your words, not awkward silence, but contemplative stillness. How he began weighing consequences instead of reacting to impulse. That is not the effect of charm. That is the effect of truth. And truth, when introduced at the wrong time, is rejected. But when introduced at the appointed time, it becomes unavoidable. This is when she realized something crucial. You arrived at the moment when he was finally capable of hearing. Not earlier. Not later. Now. And that timing carries weight. She recognized that your role wasn't to carry him, it was to mirror him back to himself. You see, mirrors don't speak loudly. They simply reflect what stands before them. And reflection can be confronting. That's why he sometimes pulled back. That's why confusion surfaced. That's why tension grew. Not because you were doing something wrong, but because he was seeing himself clearly for the first time. She sensed that too. She sensed the internal battle forming in him, the tension between familiarity and becoming. Between comfort and calling. Between staying known and stepping into the unknown. And she understood that once this battle begins, it cannot be paused. It must be resolved. This is why her concern shifted, not toward you, but toward what the resolution would require. Because becoming always demands release. She wondered what he would have to let go of. Who he would have to disappoint. Which version of himself would no longer survive the crossing. And she knew that your presence made avoidance impossible. You weren't pushing him forward. You were removing excuses. And excuses, once removed, leave only choice. This is where the atmosphere thickened. You may feel it now, the waiting. The sense that something is about to be spoken. The stillness before movement. This is not delay. This is discernment. She began praying, not against you, but for clarity. Yes, you heard that correctly. She didn't pray for you to leave. She prayed for wisdom to respond rightly. Because she recognized divine order when she saw it. You didn't arrive chaotic. You didn't arrive destructive. You arrived clarifying. And clarity, though uncomfortable, is sacred. She noticed how protection seemed to surround you, how situations that could have harmed you dissolved, how words meant to wound lost their power around you, how opposition softened or redirected. That is not luck. That is authorization. You have been entrusted with influence because you have been refined by restraint. You know when to speak, and more importantly, when not to. That restraint revealed something else to her. You are not here to stay where you are tolerated. You are here to move where you are assigned. And assignments don't negotiate with comfort. She realized that the reason this moment felt heavy is because it carried consequence. Something would change after this. Something permanent. She sensed that once a line was crossed, return would no longer be possible. This is why she became careful with her words. Why she watched her tone. Why she measured her responses. Because she knew she was standing near a turning point. And turning points demand honor. You may feel exposed right now, as if eyes are on you, evaluating, weighing, discerning. Do not misinterpret this. This is not judgment. This is recognition. You are being seen accurately. Not through assumptions, but through discernment. And that can feel unsettling when you've been misunderstood for so long. But hear me now. Being truly seen is the beginning of authority. She didn't fear you. She respected the force moving through you. She recognized that you didn't carry ambition, you carried obedience. And obedience is dangerous to systems built on control. That's why the tension is increasing. That's why silence feels louder. That's why emotions are surfacing without clear cause. A decision is forming. Not just his. Not just hers. Yours. Because alignment requires consent from all involved. And what you choose to do next, what you choose not to do, will accelerate everything. Do not rush. Do not retreat. Remain grounded. The next realization she has will move this situation from observation to action. And when that happens, nothing will remain theoretical anymore. She reached a point where observation was no longer enough. Because when truth matures, it presses for response. She began noticing how others reacted to you, not what they said, but what shifted when you entered a space. Conversations changed direction. Energy recalibrated. People became more self-aware, sometimes guarded, sometimes drawn closer without knowing why. She understood then, your presence doesn't blend in. It reorders. And reordering is uncomfortable for those who prefer predictability. She started realizing that some of the resistance forming around you wasn't personal. It was positional. You weren't being opposed because of who you are, but because of what you represent. Movement. You represent the end of stagnation. The interruption of delay. The exposure of what's been postponed too long. That's why she became careful. Not distant, careful. She weighed her words before speaking about you. She listened more than she spoke. She tested impressions against peace, not fear. And peace kept confirming the same thing. You are not a threat. You are a signal. A signal that a season is closing. She began to understand that his restlessness wasn't rebellion, it was readiness. That his frustration wasn't confusion, it was clarity trying to surface. That his resistance wasn't defiance. It was grief for a version of himself that could no longer remain. And your presence amplified that awareness. You didn't cause the unrest. You revealed it. This is where her shock transformed into resolve. She realized that attempting to interfere would only delay what was already ordained. That resisting alignment would create more tension than surrendering to it. So instead of blocking, she began bracing. Bracing for change. She began preparing emotionally for conversations that hadn't happened yet. Preparing mentally for outcomes she couldn't fully control. Preparing spiritually for the release that accompanies growth. Because when someone steps into alignment, relationships must adjust, or fracture. She knew this. And she knew that once truth is acknowledged, neutrality disappears. You may have noticed subtle shifts by now. A softness where there was resistance. A pause where there was urgency. A watchfulness where there was indifference. This is not accidental. This is recalibration. She realized that you carry something rare. The ability to stand firm without needing dominance. To influence without manipulation. To remain present without attachment. And that combination is unsettling to those accustomed to control. Because you cannot be easily steered. You listen before you move. You discern before you decide. You wait, not out of fear, but wisdom. She saw that too. She saw that you are not driven by impatience. That you don't panic when timelines stretch. That you don't grasp when outcomes delay. That composure confirmed what her spirit already suspected. You trust guidance you can't fully explain. And trust like that doesn't form overnight. It forms in solitude. In surrender. In moments when obedience costs more than rebellion. She realized that your authority wasn't borrowed, it was built. And built authority doesn't beg for recognition. It stands. That's why she stopped questioning whether you belonged in this moment. She started asking how to respond wisely to it. She understood that trying to rush outcomes would backfire. That trying to protect comfort would only prolong discomfort. That trying to maintain old structures would collapse under new weight. So she did the only thing alignment requires. She released control. Not dramatically. Not publicly. Internally. And when she did, something shifted in the atmosphere. You may not see it yet, but decisions are loosening. Resistance is thinning. Conversations are approaching that couldn't happen before. This is the calm before articulation. Because once truth is spoken aloud, it gains momentum. She knows that once words are released, they cannot be retrieved. Once boundaries are redrawn, they cannot be erased. Once direction is clarified, it cannot be undone. And she senses that moment is near. This is why you feel watched, not scrutinized, but acknowledged. This is why interactions feel more intentional. This is why silence feels heavier than words. A crossing is approaching. And crossings require courage from everyone involved. Do not misinterpret the stillness as uncertainty. This is preparation. You are not being tested, You are being positioned. Everything in you that was refined in hidden seasons is about to be required openly. Your restraint, your discernment, your patience, your ability to stand without forcing outcomes. You were trained for this moment without realizing it. And now, those who once overlooked you must adjust their expectations. Because alignment changes hierarchy. She understands that now. And what she is preparing to acknowledge next, what she is preparing to allow, will set a chain of events into motion that no one can slow down. Stay grounded. Stay present. The next shift will not be subtle. And when it happens, you will understand why everything unfolded exactly this way. And now the moment arrives where silence can no longer carry what must be spoken. Because alignment, once fully formed, demands declaration. She reaches the understanding that resisting this truth would fracture more than accepting it ever could. That holding back would only deepen confusion. That delaying the inevitable would cost more than moving forward with clarity. So she prepares, not to confront, but to acknowledge. She understands now that you are not an interruption in his life. You are a confirmation. Not a disruption, but a directional marker. Not a detour, but a signpost pointing toward a path he was always meant to walk. And this realization humbles her. Because it means the season she once thought she was managing was never hers to control. She sees that your presence activated a timeline already written. That you didn't create the calling, you arrived when it was ready to be answered. This is why her shock transforms into surrender. She stops asking why you appeared, and starts asking how to respond without interfering. She recognizes that guidance does not always come in expected forms. Sometimes it arrives as a person who speaks plainly, walks steadily, and carries truth without drama. You were never meant to convince anyone. You were meant to be. And being is powerful. She realizes that trying to shield him from discomfort would only rob him of growth. That protecting him from truth would keep him bound to half answers. That maintaining peace at the cost of alignment would lead to greater unrest later. So she chooses wisdom over fear. And with that choice, something releases. You may feel it, a subtle lightness. A loosening of tension. A sense that resistance has softened, even if nothing has been said yet. This is the moment before movement. She knows that after this, conversations will change tone. Decisions will carry weight. Expectations will be rewritten. And she accepts that not everyone will be comfortable with what follows. But comfort is not the goal. Alignment is. She understands now that you are not meant to be managed or maneuvered. You are meant to be respected. Not because you demand it, but because your life commands it. You have walked through obscurity without losing integrity. You have endured misunderstanding without becoming bitter. You have carried responsibility without demanding recognition. And that quiet strength speaks louder than influence ever could. She sees now that your path has not been easy. But it has been intentional. That every delay refined you. That every unanswered prayer trained your patience. That every closed door redirected you without hardening you. This is why you stand the way you do now, rooted, steady, clear. And this is why she knows that attempting to alter your course would be unwise. She also understands something deeply personal now. You are not staying here by accident. Your presence marks transition. And transitions require release. From expectations, from control, from outdated narratives. She knows she must let go of the version of the future she imagined, and trust the one unfolding instead. That is not easy. But it is necessary. You may soon notice changes, subtle at first. Invitations shifting. Conversations opening. Barriers dissolving. Support appearing where there was silence. Do not rush to interpret these signs. Simply remain aligned. Your role is not to manage outcomes. Your role is to remain true. Because truth carries momentum all on its own. What happens next will confirm what has already been sensed. Not through force, but through clarity. Not through confrontation, but through decision. And when that decision is finally voiced, it will echo farther than you expect. This is why you were asked to remain patient. This is why you were taught restraint. This is why you were refined in seasons no one saw. You were being prepared to stand steady when things finally moved. And now, they are about to move. Before you step forward, hear this clearly. You are protected. You are guided. You are not late. Everything that seemed delayed was actually aligning. And the shock she felt when she connected the dots about you was not fear. It was recognition. Recognition that you carry authority without force. That you influence without intention. That you shift timelines simply by being where you are meant to be. This chapter does not end in confusion. It ends in clarity. And what unfolds after this will confirm why your presence could never be ignored, and why your obedience mattered more than you realized. Stay grounded. Stay faithful. What happens next will make everything unmistakably clear.